Just like that, we're back for week 4. What is going on, you guys? My name is Turtle, this is Outlier Fantasy, and today we're going to go over week 4 and start sits in fantasy football. Some of the players we like in these matchups in week 4, some of these players we don't like, and players that we should be tempering our expectations on. I won't hold you any longer. We have a lot to cover in this video, so let's go ahead and roll the intro. Thursday night, we have the Arizona Cardinals playing the Seattle Seahawks, and for the Arizona Cardinals defense, they are very susceptible to wide receivers and opposing quarterbacks, as over the last year and a half or so, they are 27th in points allowed to the quarterback position, so I kind of like Sam Darnold in this spot here. I'm definitely upgrading JSN in this matchup. Being that Mac Jones didn't look terrible against this Arizona Cardinals defense last week for fantasy, I could see Sam Darnold having a nice streaming game of around 18 fantasy points. If we look at the 3 weeks that the Arizona Cardinals have played against teams, the only quarterback to really pop off on them was Bryce Young, who threw 3 touchdown passes after the game was already over and decided. So if this is a blowout situation, maybe Darnold bounces back and thrives in garbage time. But otherwise, I'm not really banking on a big matchup from him. Let's now talk about the other side of the ball with the Seattle Seahawks offensive players. For Arizona Cardinals players, I am starting Trey Benson, even though this isn't the most ideal matchup for him. And as for our Arizona Cardinals quarterbacks and wide receivers, this is going to be a tough matchup for Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. So if you could, I would sit them. And obviously, you're not benching Trey McBride, so you're throwing him in your lineups regardless. The Arizona Cardinals defense is only second to the Minnesota Vikings in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position, so I don't love the matchup for Marvin Harrison Jr. If you could, I would look elsewhere. We finally got a London game, boys. We got the Minnesota Vikings and the Pittsburgh Steelers playing in London, which is going to be really exciting. We know that in these kind of overseas games, the kickers are very utilized in this early window, so definitely elevate Will Reichard, and even though Chris Boswell is one of the best kickers, elevate him as well. For Pittsburgh Steelers players, I'm going to say Jaylen Warren is the only must-start player. I would temper expectations on DK Metcalf. You can play him, but for the Minnesota Vikings defense, they are a tough defense, as we just seen last week, against wide receivers and quarterbacks. The Cincinnati Bengals had nothing going for them on offense, and I'm not saying that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to get blanked, but this is definitely going to be a tough matchup, and I would definitely sit Aaron Rodgers and at the very least be tempering the expectations of a DK Metcalf. Surprisingly this year, the Pittsburgh Steelers have given up a lot of fantasy points to the tight end position, and this checks out as last week where Hunter Henry absolutely dominated them for 2 touchdowns, so TJ Hockenson is going to be a must-start tight end this week in fantasy. And this should go without saying, if you have Justin Jefferson or Jordan Mason, you're probably rolling them out in your lineups regardless, so go ahead and play them. Now we can talk Bills and Saints. This one should be brief. We're definitely starting Josh Allen. This is a great matchup for James Cook, who we're already starting every week regardless. And if we're going to start any Bills wide receiver or pass catcher, I like Keon Coleman this week, but I'm leaving Dalton Kincaid on my bench. This is not a good matchup for him. Temper your expectations on Chris Olave. You can start Juwan Johnson because there's just too many targets to leave on your bench, and you're obviously starting Alvin Kamara. Let's focus on the AFC South divisional matchup. The Titans and the Texans are playing this weekend, and we're never benching Nico Collins, so he's a must-start player. Elevate the running backs Nick Chubb and Woody Marks in this game. The Tennessee Titans have been very susceptible to the running back position this year, and we watched Jonathan Taylor have a hat trick last weekend on them, so feel good about these running backs if you have him this week. Dalton Kincaid has a good matchup for tight end, so I'm going to say you can play him in deeper leagues if you need a streaming option, and we're going to temper our expectations on a Tennessee Titans wide receivers, Alec Iamaner and Calvin Ridley. And I can't believe I'm saying this 2 weeks in a row. Let's double down on Chiggy Okonkwo, upgrade him in this spot. I really like the matchup here. Really good news for anyone who has Cleveland Browns players this weekend who are going up against the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are very susceptible to giving up fantasy points to the running back and tight end position, which is ironically really the only fantasy positions we want to be starting on this Browns offense to begin with. So upgrade Harold Fannin Jr., David Njoku has a good matchup this week. Dylan Sampson, Quinshon Judkins. We like these players. They have a good matchup. Maybe this will be a close scoring game and they will benefit from that. And as in terms of the Lions, you're obviously starting Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. I would temper expectations on Jameson Williams in this one. There may not be that big play that he gets to break to open this game up for the Lions. And I'm sitting Jared Goff. This is not a good matchup for the quarterback. Next up, we have the Falcons versus the Commanders. And the Falcons defense has been very good this year. So I don't think if Mariota is the starter again this week that we're going to play Marcus Mariota. I would maybe even say if Jaden Daniels is active to bench him and hopefully play somebody else. Assuming you had somebody last week, you might as well roll out a different guy again. This Falcons defense is very tough. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt does not have a good matchup. I would sit Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel, to be honest. And I don't like Zach Ertz in this game either. But if you needed a tight end, that is one player that I'm okay with you starting in this Commanders offense. He is a must start every week, but I would temper your expectations this week on Bijan Robinson. I really like Drake London's matchup. I hope he could finally break through for us fantasy owners like myself. And Kyle Pitts has a great matchup. We like this one as well. Do not start Michael Penix Jr. You are crazy. For Eagles versus the Bucks, I think we're starting whoever's playing in this game. This should be a fantasy-friendly game for everyone involved. Saquon Barkley, Bucky Irving, Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts. You know all these players. They're all going in your starting lineups. I don't know in terms of whether Mike Evans is going to play, Chris Godwin's going to play, but I would assume you'd like to play all of them as Philly has given up a lot of points to wide receivers so far this year. And I'm so glad A.J. Brown had a great game because now we're finally not going to have the question again, do I bench A.J. Brown? He's going in your lineups. Panthers Patriots. This is a game where there's probably not many players you could start in this one. Chuba Hubbard would be the big one for me and Ted McMillan. Otherwise, Drake May does not have a good matchup in this one. I'm probably going to keep Travion Henderson on my bench one more week to see how this offense goes. It's also not a great matchup for him, so if he has a bad game, do not panic and act like the sky is falling just yet. And the only Patriots player that has a good matchup is Hunter Henry, so we can upgrade him into that starting territory once again. Now let's talk the Chargers versus the Giants. I really like Amari and Hampton in this one. The matchup is going to give him that top 5 running back potential this week. I really like all of the Chargers wide receivers, so Quinn Johnson, Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey must start him. Justin Herbert must be started. And for the Giants, I would only start Cam Skattebo and Malik Neighbors at this point. The matchup is not very good for wide receivers, so I would leave Wan'Dale Robinson on the bench this week. Jaguars versus 49ers. Definitely get as many 49ers in your lineup as possible, especially if Brock Purdy is going to return. I like the matchups for Pearsall. If Jawan Jennings comes back and plays, definitely start him. I really like Christian McCaffrey in this one. That's an obvious one. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, Travis Etienne must be started. Bashal Tutin is a very low floor but high upside flex play. Definitely touchdown dependent at this point, but if you need to, you can play him. And unfortunately, you got to start Brian Thomas. Now for the Colts versus the Rams, you're definitely starting the running backs. Jonathan Taylor and Kyron Williams were not coming out of your lineup to begin with. Michael Pittman Jr. is a great play this week. The wide receivers, Davante Adams, Puka Nacua must starts. Tyler Warren must be started. You can play Daniel Jones if you need to, but I think this is going to be a spot where Daniel Jones falls back down to earth in week 4. We're almost done, guys, I promise. Now let's talk about the Bears versus the Raiders. You obviously are starting your Ashton Jeanty, Brock Bowers. This is a great matchup for the wide receivers of the Raiders. So Trey Tucker, Dante Thornton, Jacoby Myers. These are great matchups this week. As in terms for the other side of the ball, Rome Odunze cannot come out of your lineup. You still got to start DJ Moore, unfortunately. And I like the matchup for DeAndre Swift, but I'm not starting Caleb Williams just yet. So if you wanted a quarterback in this one, I like Geno Smith over Caleb Williams as a streaming play. Now for Ravens versus Chiefs. This should be a great matchup for Isaiah Pacheco in this one. Patrick Mahomes must be played. Travis Kelce, you got to be starting him. I like Tyquan Thornton this week. I like Hollywood Brown. And for the Ravens, you're obviously starting Derrick Henry. Maybe Mark Andrews has another big game in him. We'll just have to wait and see. Maybe Isaiah likely returns to this lineup. We don't know just yet. But even though we have to start them, we need to make sure we're tempering expectations on Lamar Jackson and the Ravens wide receivers, as this is not a good matchup for them this week. Now for Packers Cowboys, Javonte Williams, Josh Jacobs, Jordan Love. You're going to start the Jays Jake Ferguson, add him to that list as well. Tucker Kraft is an okay play at the tight end, and I would be tempering expectations on Dak, and I'm not thinking that this is going to be a matchup where we see a lot of Jalen Tolbert and opportunities for him in this one. But you can play George Pickens if you have him. The first Monday Night Football game of the week, Jets vs. Dolphins. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, these are all players that must be started for the Dolphins. In terms of the Jets players, it just stops at Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson for that. Dare I even say Tua is a capable streaming quarterback this week, but that's still a little rich. Finally, Bengals Broncos. These are the streaming quarterbacks you do want. Jake Browning and Bo Nix should both have pretty solid games. I'm starting J.K. Dobbins if I have him. Start Courtland Sutton. You can play Troy Franklin, and you're starting your Bengals as accordingly. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown, they're all going in your lineups regardless. That's going to wrap it up for the start-sits of Week 4. There are a lot of players we must start this week, obviously. There are some players that we could leave on our benches, and there's definitely a lot of temper expectations and some tough matchups. Hopefully those matchups are not going to affect your fantasy team score, and maybe they'll affect your opponent's matchups even more. Maybe they're not in tune to the matchups because they don't subscribe to Outlier Fantasy and watch his videos on YouTube. That would be crazy. But speaking of crazy, if you have any crazy start-sit questions, any questions at all for your fantasy team before your lineups lock in, even on Thursday night or Sunday night, definitely drop those questions in the comments. I love to help out as many viewers as possible, so ask away, don't be shy, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. That's all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Turtle, this is Outlier Fantasy, and I will see you in the next video. Wow, you stuck to the end of this video? Thank you so much. If you're new here, make sure you check out one of these videos on the screen right now. And don't forget, before you leave, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any fantasy football videos on this channel. That's all I got for you guys. I'll see you in the next one.